Yeah. And I like to think, and I'm curious what you think about this because everyone I talk to, especially who decides to compete or is in the gym fairly regularly, kind of has this feeling. They're like, hey, I wish I started earlier. And for me, I still have that feeling starting like in seventh grade. I'm like, oh, could I have started earlier? But
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure at the age that you and I started, like starting earlier wouldn't have that much of a benefit. So I'm curious if you still have that like voice in your head that's like, did you start at the right time? How do you feel about your start?
So I feel good about it. I started right around that 16-year-old age, I would say. And I thought that was too late then, as you said, but now that I'm older and mainly see, I have a younger brother. He is 15. We're 10 years apart, and he started powerlifting when he was 13 or just had turned 14 maybe. Um, and got really into it. And he's very talented. He's very strong, but it has caused him a lot of grief because I think one of the main things that we might have had that maybe not fully, but we had developed more than himself is the maturity to deal with things, deal with bad training sessions, deal with training plateaus, to deal with adversity in training because he really like takes a mental beating and puts a mental beating on himself. And I really try to pick him up. But he's a great example of he is his own worst critic. And a lot of that I think is maybe
Mm,
because that maturity hasn't developed to a degree that may be needed to because nobody comes down hard on him other than himself. But it really puts a strain on him some days and leads to some very poor sessions. So I think I
that
started at a good time.
yeah, that's an interesting point that I hadn't thought of before. Like when I was starting,
Yeah.
and like you can probably relate to this. It was just you go in and there were some sets and reps on the board, and you just kind of threw on some weight, and like the
Hmm.
best term I have for it is broed it out. And
Hmm.
if you failed, then you're like, oh, whatever. Like I'll get it
Yeah.
next time. And
well,
there
well,
was a culture of like if you didn't fail, you weren't trying hard enough too.
hmm absolutely. I agree with that. And like a funny story that I know I've told my fiance and I've probably told lots of people is I remember when you were first exploring the, powerlifting and starting to get us guys into it. I remember Seth was, getting into it. We were doing like, I remember a couple of times we were doing, and you may remember this too, sets of like 20 squats, back squats to like end workout sessions.
Mhm.
I remember doing some leg days, and for a while there, we were hitting that one set of 20 at the end. And then I remember one day
Yes.
we were bench pressing, and you like had been doing your research because that you've always been that type of way. You do your research, you're a smart guy, and you'd come to us and talked about how you found research on like suboptimal effort. Like maybe we should lift less than our max, like quickly. And it was like whoa, like so definitely the culture of do or die was present, until that point.
Yeah, whether that's right or wrong, like because
Yeah,
now if I watch someone who maxes out every time, I'm like, ah, please stop. But
yeah,
always recenter with, oh, that was me, you know.
it was, and that's one of the great things about powerlifting. Like on the days you are struggling with training plateaus or an injury or whatever, misfortune may have come your way, to think back to like, okay, at least today, even on my worst days, I at least understand training principles at this point, or like, so just that progression in and of itself is something to hang your hat on to be like, I was doing some pretty dangerous stuff at one point. That's why we don't judge anybody for being at that point, but definitely
Yeah.
it's good to work past it and then look back.
Yeah, and Stan and I, Stan Brown, who was on the last episode here, we were talking about something similar, like seeing someone in the gym who's maybe doing something that isn't the smartest thing, or it doesn't look like they're trying that hard, and like the perspective that you get as a power lifter, or just as someone in the gym who over time you learn not to like judge them so hard in your
Yeah.
mind. And it kind of goes with actually today in class, I had a student who had mentioned like he went into the gym and he had never bench pressed before. Like he was a track runner, he's going into college,
Mhm.
and he felt pressured. He just like slapped on
Oh, you
95
just.
pounds to try and bench it.
Oh no.
Yeah, and he was like on the way
Did it?
down, just
Did it?
something in my shoulder like popped. Which he's fine. Like
Oh.
there was no major
Okay. Good.
injury,
Good.
but he like failed it and felt like he maybe tweaked something. And I was trying to get across to him like just start with the bar and like inch
Yeah.
up in weight, like slowly progress. There's no shame in doing the bar, but it's interesting to see how someone very inexperienced or like in a high school weight room, it's still the same mentality. It's like you better have some weight on the bar or
Yeah.
else I don't even know what.
Yeah. It's one of those things. I had somebody. I can't remember the guy's name, but I had a kid at Frostburg. He was a lacrosse player, very athletic guy. I mean, he was a short guy, but built well, lifted weights a lot. And he came up to me and knew I liked the powerlifting. He was like, what's your back squat? And I told him what my best in competition was. And he said, oh, well, that sucks. It's higher than mine. And I was like, oh, Evan, that was his name. I was like, Evan, you weigh 140 pounds. I was like, like you don't have to, your back squat's very good proportionally. It's much better than mine. Um, but yeah, people, there is that stigma. I guess it's that masculinity, but eventually you grow past that to where you're like, I'm coming in here to accomplish a task, that is laid out in my program. And what is happening around me is noise. Not that you can't enjoy some of it, but I think that's part of not judging people also is it's just noise, like I don't want anybody to get hurt or anything, but I'm not even cognizant enough of you usually to judge you during my training sessions. Um, so, it's one of those things you'll get past it with time, hopefully, most lifters, but I can relate.
Yeah, yeah. And to go with that, the last thing I'll say on it is one of something I hear over and over in the gym, and it cracks me up. I love my gym, by the way. Shout out to Iron Forge in
Mhm.
Uniontown, Pennsylvania. You know, um, Great atmosphere. Everyone in there is very supportive. But I'll just hear someone say like, "Oh man, you're the strongest person in this gym," or like
Mhm.
something along the lines. And in my mind as a power lifter, I'm like, well, the goal is not to be the strongest in the gym. My
Yeah,
goal is to
yeah,
be the strongest, like in the United States or beyond, or something like that. So like adding to that noise, being the strongest in the gym might be something that younger me would think about a whole lot more than current me for sure.
yeah, absolutely. That's that young man, I guess, when you're just running hot. That's my brother. I mean, he's young and all the time he's like, oh, that kid was squatting X or Y. How old do you think he is? Do you think he's older than me? And I'm like, does it matter? Like, does he compete at 114 in the USPA and is he showing up on whatever date,
Right.
um, so no, you're not, nobody's getting a medal for this one. So let it go.
Right. And that perfect segue into